Good afternoon, friends. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Ben-Nun Institute of Biblical Research. The video here will also be airing on some of our other platforms, which I will share with you at the end of the broadcast. I do want to open this particular broadcast with a short prayer that God will guide and lead us through this. There's been so much deception in the world. And of course, I've been a part of that in the early days, with a passion for my people, the Jewish people, and wanting them to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ, but yet thinking many of these prophecies here were yet to be fulfilled, or even compound fulfillments, etc. And so I have followed into that same trend that we've all been following in, many of us, for years. Of course, there's others that have woke up to that already, but I just want to ask the Lord to lead us, and that we might together go through this. And then something I'll say to you before we get started. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would bless this message tonight, Father. Open the ears of the people. Open their hearts, Father, and speak to them, Father, and show them, Lord, where you have fulfilled your word. And we know there are prophecies yet to be fulfilled, Father. So I don't look at your word as being everything is complete. But where things are complete, Father, we need to know what they are, so that we know who we are and where we stand today. We ask this in your Son's name, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Friends, listen to me. I was talking to my wife just the other day, and I said to her, everything happens for a reason. And I realize that years ago, even before I met my wife, I must have been about 26 years old, when the Lord showed me a monstrous serpent coming after me. It's a serpent that literally could fly through the air when he would make his attack. And as he flew through the air, he'd come at me, and I had a small, I called it a dagger. It's probably about a blade, about like that, maybe about, 12-inch blade, something to that effect. And I struck that serpent in the side of the head. And when I did, he went off very angrily. And then the Lord spoke to me audibly in the dream. This was actually a dream, so audibly in a dream. And he said, when he returns, he will be far more furious or vicious than he was before. And sure enough, that serpent came again. And he flew through the air to make his attack. And when he did, he was so massive, I was able to jump on the serpent as if you were riding a horse. And the Lord spoke to me as I'm on this serpent. And he said, you must remove his head. And then I came out of the dream and I was wide awake. I have never forgot this dream as long as I live. I remember Sister Deanne Loper, and I had not shared this dream at the time. She had had a very similar dream a little while back, and she said to me as well, the Lord had revealed to her, and I think she also had a dream, that you are to cut the head of the serpent off. Well, the only way I can see that that can be done is exactly by what was in my hands. And that was that dagger, which, if you take it as a sword, the word of God, cutting off his head. Let me share with you these scriptures here, and let's see if we can't decapitate this serpent. And I say that in light of the fact that right now in Israel, what's going on? I want to share that with you. Let's take a look. So as we deal with this head of the serpent, as I said, a lot of things are going on. And I mentioned this in a video that I did the other day while traveling. And they always say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So as we look at the events that are going on, as I mentioned, a lot of things were happening in Israel. They're getting ready to go under a lockdown. I'm going to speak about that in just a moment because that got announced on Sunday. But at the same time, while they're talking about doing the lockdown, we have this Abrahamic Accord ceremony that's going on, the UAE-Israel deal signing ceremony to be held September 15th in Washington. We have Bahrain, here we go. Bahrain becomes the latest Arab nation to recognize Israel. And Washington has become the latest Arab nation. Bahrain, has become the latest Arab nation to agree to normalize ties with Israel as part of a broader diplomatic push by President Donald Trump. Just trying to put a feather in his cap on this. I wouldn't want to be the guy to be involved in any of these type deals, but it's all a part of the Abrahamic Accord. According to the article right here on ChristianPost.com, peace moving slowly but surely in the Middle East. And many of the mainstream pastors are for it. It says President Trump and his administration facilitated a historic world-changing peace treaty between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. The Abrahamic Accord is the first peace treaty since the Israel-Jordan Treaty signed 26 years ago. This was a stroke of diplomatic genius and applauded the hard work of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the countless others that are involved in this. And of course, they go into a lot of other details in this article. But it's kind of odd because Israel is set to a new nationwide lockdown as virus cases surge. This came out on September the 13th, 2020. And of course, it says here, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Sunday announced a new countrywide lockdown will be imposed amid a stubborn surge in coronavirus cases. Beginning Friday, the start of the Jewish holiday season, schools, restaurants, malls, hotels will shut down among other businesses, and Israelis will face restrictions on movement on gatherings. Okay? And our goal is to stop the increase in cases and lower morbidity. Netanyahu said in a national broadcast statement, I know that these steps come at a difficult price for all of us. This is not the holiday we are used to. The lockdown will remain in place for at least 3 weeks. Going through the high holidays there in Israel, the fall feast, as it were, is being called on what we have every year. We have the fall feast in Israel. But as you were looking at this, then we've got other issues that nobody's even considering. Well, before I go into this one here on Haaretz, just remember, Israeli rabbi says he's already holding meetings with the Messiah. This was back on August 3rd, 2020, right? Says here, a recent interview with Israeli radio again featured prominent rabbis explaining that the Messiah is just about to reveal himself. Rabbi Yaakov Zisholtz on Sunday told religious broadcaster Radio 2000 that Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky recently told him that Kanievsky is already in direct contact with the Messiah. To understand why religious Jews are taking this serious, it's important to know that Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky is considered one of the 2 or 3 top rabbis of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in Israel. And he says here, this is actually from Rabbi Zholowitz, the process of redemption is about to start happening very quickly and at a fast pace. It is important that people remain calm and steady and to act properly at the right time, in the right time. There are potential Messiah in every generation, and there are righteous men who know precisely who it is. This, of course, true in this generation. Getting the word out now that the Messiah is closer than ever is a matter of life and death. Haven't you heard, Gog and Magog, that what is going to happen very soon? Right now, the situation is explosive, more than you can possibly imagine. Everyone needs to know whether they are on the inside or if they are going to be left out. All right, now, these things are going on, already claiming that they're meeting with the rabbis. Now Israel's going under a lockdown. And, of course, the Times of Israel published about a week ago, officials mulled the Temple Mount closure as the old city declared a COVID-19 red zone. And then we have the article on Haaretz. Israeli health minister's cure for COVID-19 is the Messiah. Interesting, right? The Messiah is the cure. We are praying and hoping that the Messiah will arrive before Passover. Now that, of course, was back during the spring feast. I am sure the Messiah will come and bring us out. God brought us out of Egypt. Soon he will go out in the freedom, and the Messiah will come and redeem us from all the troubles of the world. Remember, the coronavirus is the word for crown. These things are not just happening by chance. But look at all these lockdowns. Again, they're going under lockdown. Need I remind you of one of the friends of mine in Israel that shared some insights with me that was going on back on July 16th, as you can see on the letter here. Israel is going back on lockdown because of China virus. This was in July. August, September, here we are. We knew about this, 6 weeks before they announced it to the public? However, much of the virus cases are being embellished and not all accurate. There is some truth to it, and it's valid in a way, but it's not what it really is really going on. Israel, notice that, it's not what is really going on right there. Israel wants all its people at their homes and their neighborhoods because Iran, Hezbollah, Yemen may attack Israel. What I was TTT, which means told, is that Israel fears all their people being stranded in different cities and regions away from homes and family. Israel doesn't want people stranded on roads with no food, water, medication, away from kids, so they're locking everything down as soon as possible. Directly told to me, Iran generals' leaders have been told to overthrow religious creeps and take back their government and society, or attacks will continue and get worse. They have been given the ultimatum, and the U.S. and Israel are going to follow through fully until Iran has a coup or it is destroyed. In the green right here, it is believed that Iran will attack Israel with chem and biological and nukes if this escalates. Oh, they're saying that Iran doesn't have a nuke yet. I've told you for years they have nuclear weapons. This is why Israel is going on lockdown. This is why, because of the war. What was that article speaking about? Remember the Gog and Magog? Messiah's got to come. Without alarming the population, China virus is valid, but it's convenient excuse to herd and corral the people for their own safety. And Russia's been told too they will have all destroyed in Syria if they don't stand down or scale back. So we go back and we see the titles. The Messiah is the cure for COVID-19. That was back in the spring, right? Officials mold Temple Mount closure as Old City declared a COVID-19 red zone. Getting ready for war is what they're getting ready for. Now comes the interesting thing. Israeli rabbis says he's already holding meetings with the Messiah. We know this, August the 3rd. Just shared this information with you just a second ago. But if you remember, here's where the big issue comes. Netanyahu is supposed to be the man that hands over the keys to the Mashiach. They've got to get a Gog and Magog war going as well if they're going to make it look like prophecies being fulfilled, right? See, the lockdown will remain in place for at least 3 weeks. Where was it? The one that I just shared with you a moment ago. I lost my place on it there. Okay, I just have to continue on here with this. Now let me remind you what the video says here, where Netanyahu is meeting with the rebbe, as he's known, Menachem Schneerson. Of course, he's passed away. But this is where we get the Noahide laws. And Netanyahu obviously is a representative of the Chabad organization because he made sure that these got passed. Much success. I have seen you a long time. Blessings and success. A double portion of benediction. I came to ask your blessing and help in everything, in all areas, both personal and political. Not that you can't read this. Since we last met, many things have progressed, the Rebbe says. Many things have progressed. What hasn't changed, however, is that the Messiah still hasn't come. So do something to hasten his coming. We're doing, he claims. Apparently it's not enough. Since many hours have already passed today, he's still not here. But there are still a few hours left in the day. So try. Okay. The point is, you have to understand, that is part of the ideology in Orthodox Judaism in order to bring about the Messiah, bad things must happen. Let me continue on. The Rebbe's message to Netanyahu, a prophecy for today. Now, of course, this was 2 years ago. But notice what he says. In a special interview with Arutz Shiva, Rabbi David Nachasson, a close friend of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, spoke about Netanyahu's connection to the Blvd, Rebbe, and said there is no doubt Netanyahu will win over his adversaries. What's he talking about? In that particular meeting, which is a different meeting, the Rebbe had said to him that he was going to have 119 different adversaries. So when Netanyahu began to get all these criminal charges brought against him, they now consider that all of his adversaries, right? Around that time, I brought Netanyahu to the Rebbe in honor of his upcoming immigration. It was in the spring of 1988. The Rebbe told him some things very explicitly, as if they were a prophecy. He spoke to him about the future, about what Netanyahu would go through when he arrived in Israel. Specifically, that he would have a fight with 119 people. Interesting, right? Every time I show him the video where the Rebbe is telling him about 119 Knesset members, he becomes very emotional. Rabbi Nachasson added, because it is so accurate, the Rebbe told him explicitly that he would come to Israel and fight 119 adversaries. The Rebbe is telling him what will happen in the future, and he's smiling because he doesn't really understand what he's in for. Well, he did the crimes. Let's face it. But the point being is, though, as it is believed Netanyahu will hand the scepter to the Messiah, son of David, written by Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. This is on Israel 365 News. Also, the very proud sponsor of the Israel 365 Bible that has all the nice Talmudic quotes in there for you to be able to follow. So kind of look at the connection between the Chabad organization, the Talmudic ideology, and of course the Israel 365 Bible that goes with it, and the fact that we are running out of time for Netanyahu to be able to fulfill this purpose, guys. Right? So like I said, the image is 1,000 words that can be spoken. And at the same time, when I show you that, that's because of the Abrahamic Accord and all these Arabic nations suddenly beginning to willing to do peace with Israel. Well, they're worried about what might happen if they don't, right? That's where the issue comes down. So Israel is going under a lockdown. Okay? Israel is going to be in a lockdown. Let me find it again here for you. Nationwide lockdown for another coronavirus, which you already knew about because I even shared this letter with you back when I got it in July that they were going under a lockdown. But not because of a coronavirus pandemic. Not because of that, but because rather of a war coming. And as we saw in this one article, and I forget exactly where it was, it talks about the Gog of Magog war. Was it in this article? I don't think so, because I think we do have it highlighted. I got too much going on at one time. I can't remember where everything's at, so I apologize for that. I think it's right. Yeah, here it is right here. Okay, getting the word out now that the Messiah is closer than ever is a matter of life and death. Haven't you heard of Gog and Magog? Well, they're creating the Gog of Magog war. And so the only way to expose the beast's kingdom and to off with the serpent's head is to show you what the Word of God actually does say. And we're going to go into that Gog and Magog, not tonight, on another day. So let's go back to Hosea and let's begin here. Come, let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us. On the third day, he will raise us up, that we may live in his presence. Let us know eagerly and strive to know the Lord. His going forth is sure as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter rain that watereth the earth. O Ephraim, what shall I do unto thee? O Judah, what shall I do unto thee? For your goodness is the morning cloud, and as the dew that early passeth away. In other words, they don't do so well so long. Now, in times past, I have always placed this prophecy as a future fulfillment, taking it, looking at the 3 days. Instead of being 3 literal days, I took it and Listen, it's not wrong to take and type things 3,000 years as the day of the Lord is 1,000 years. All right. But in this particular case here, I didn't realize Hosea, the prophecy of Hosea chapter 6 being fulfilled 2,000 years ago. After 2 days will he revive us. On the third day, he will raise us up that we may live in his presence. Remember Ezekiel, the valley full of dry bones that I just did the message for you recently? Right? Let's just, so you know, Ezekiel 37. The hand of the Lord was upon me, and the Lord carried me out in the spirit and set me down in the midst of the valley, and it was full of bones. And he caused me to pass by them round about, and behold, there were very many in the open valley, and lo, they were very dry. He said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O Lord God, thou knowest. How many of you are familiar that there were, I think it was the tribe of Ephraim that went up out of the land of Egypt before they were supposed to go up, thinking this was the time to go, and they died in battle, and their bones were left right there between the promised land and Egypt. They never were buried. Just a thought, just wondering if you guys remember that. But anyway, Ezekiel prophesies of these dry bones. Then he said unto me, prophesy over these bones, say unto them, O ye dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God unto these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. Notice that, breath to enter into you. Wow. How many of you remember the message I did? Let me just pull this up real quick. Let's see. I think this was over on Israeli News Live that I did this message about. Oh, it's just amazing. Ezekiel in the Dead Sea Scrolls there. Here we go, right there. And that one verse right there that we didn't have in our own, little worded a little differently anyway. You find that in the Dead Sea Scrolls. But Ezekiel literally asked, he's talking about right here, the bone, connect to the bone and the joint with this joint, etc. You know, the sinews, the valley of dry bones, Ezekiel 37. Then he says, oh Yahweh, when will these things happen? And Yahweh said to me, we got a little blank spot, but he says, and a tree will bend over and straighten up. And you remember I told you the sister Mun was her YouTube name, and she shares with me right after that about how that she shares with me how that in 1 Corinthians 23, and let me just share that with you. I didn't think to put it up here, but I'll go to it. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 23. I want you to be able to see it because some people didn't realize it. But we preach Christ crucified unto the Jews, and a stumbling block, and the word stumbling block, as I scroll over that, if you'll look down there, is a trap stick, that is a snare, occasion of fault, stumbling, offense thing that offends, a stumbling block. Right there, if you notice right after the trap stick, a bent sapling. A bent sapling. What do you know? You think maybe Paul knew Ezekiel, the particular one like in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that we didn't have? You think maybe he might have known something like that? Sure he did. Sure he did. So, I mean, it's exciting to me. These things are exciting. So Ezekiel, it was prophesying of Christ. When would Ezekiel be fulfilled? In other words, when would Ezekiel 37 be fulfilled? When the tree is bent over. When Christ died on the cross and it was laid over. And then he straightens back up again. So then we come to Hosea, the prophecy of Hosea. Right? Oh, and Ezekiel, sorry. After 2 days will he revive us. On the third day he will raise us up that we may live in his presence. He comes as what? As unto us as the rain, as the latter rain that watereth the earth. Let's take a look at some of these things. Matthew 27, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were open, and many of the bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. Oh, wow. So there were people that had been sleeping in the dust of the earth that actually resurrected. And not to forget as well, Job, what does Job say? That with an iron pen and lead, they were graven in the rock forever. Let's start with verse 23 right here. Oh, that my words were now written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. That with an iron pen and lead, they were graven in the rock forever. But as for me, I know that my Redeemer liveth. And that he, according to the King James Version, I believe it is, if we look at that, that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. That's how King James words it there. And that he will witness at the last upon the dust. That's definitely not a good translation. Ve'achron, and afterwards. In other words, at the latter time. Alacha yakum. Upon the dust shall he stand. Do you realize what he's saying when he says that? Alacha yakum. It's more precious than you could ever even imagine. Let's look at Genesis chapter 2. Then the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. Oh, wow. There it is. See? Right there he says, Elohim et ha'adam afar min ha'adamah. That word right there, afar. All right, let me highlight this for you. And there it is, alone. Ein, fe, resh, afar. He formed the man of the dust of the ground. And what did he do to him? And he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Nishmar chaim, ve'pak be'pa'av, nishmar chaim, Yahi ha'adam, le'nefesh chaya. And the man become a living soul. Why do we say that? Because Job said what? Right? Job said, but as for me, I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he will witness, or that he afterwards at the latter time will rise up. Yakum. He will rise up. He will resurrect. But it's not just a resurrection. Alapha. Okay? Upon the dust. He rises up. In other words, he brings Ezekiel 37 to a fruition. These bones are dry. They're laying on the dust of the earth. But Christ resurrects and brings them with him. And we already saw that Matthew says many that were slept in the earth and the graves were open, and many of the bodies of the saints which slept arose, right? We got that. We got Job declaring it as well. And when after my skin and this is destroyed, then without my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself. Mine eyes shall behold, not another's. In other words, not of somebody else's eyes. My reins are consumed within me. That's exciting, isn't it? So Hosea says that. Oh, wow. Ephraim, what shall I do unto thee, O Judah? What shall I do unto thee? For your goodness as the morning cloud is due, early it passes away. Let me see what else I may have had written down here just so I don't miss anything. Also in, Job, we already did Job. Got Genesis there. See? Now we're in Ephesians. Here's another one to prove what was going on. While Christ wasn't just, when he died on the cross, 3 days he was buried. What else went on? The scripture says in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 8, wherefore he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive. He gave gifts unto men. Then he ascended. What is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? That he descended is the same also that ascended up above, far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. Oh my. Peter notices as well, 1 Peter chapter 3. For Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison. Now the ones that were in prison were those fallen angels that had cohabitated with the women on the earth and brought forth these giants. You know, there's somebody made a comment out there. They said, well, we can debunk your whole Nephilim doctrine, Steve, with one quote. The angels of heaven are neither marry nor are given in marriage. If anything, it supports what I teach on that. Because the whole point was they sinned against God. They went against what God had said for them to do. And the very fact that they came down and did this, they went against the natural course that God had ordained them for. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a sin, would it? If God didn't say the angels... See, in fact, he actually says, if you're going back to that scripture, it's because... I think it's like something like, know you not that we would be like the angels. You know, they neither are married nor given in marriage. You know, talking about the resurrection. Because they were asking the question about, and I'm just trying to go back and remember this a little bit. You know, there's one man, they had a wife, he died and didn't have no children. Then the next one marries her and he dies and didn't have any children. And at the end, after they all die, nobody has kids. Whose wife is she going to be in the resurrection? He says, you know, you err not on the scripture. In heaven, you're not married, you're not given into marriage. You're like the angels. Well, there's the point right there. Yeah, up there you don't, but down here you did. The angels that fell, they fell what? They weren't given in marriage up there. That's right. They didn't have a sexual relationship. But when they fell, that's why they're called Nephilim, or Nephilim in this case. They are the Nephilim because they are the fallen ones, and the Nephilim are the children of the fallen ones. As Moses clearly writes it in his own wording there. So the whole case is moot as far as that goes. All right, now, so let's take a look. So anyway, he preached. So he was down there doing things, but also those that had died, those believers, they were resurrected. So see, God didn't forget them. He didn't forget them at all. Let's move on down in Hosea. All right, so therefore he said, I have hewed them by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of my mouth. Thy judgment goeth forth as the light, for I desire mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. But they, like men, have transgressed the covenant. There they have dealt treacherously against me. You know, and actually, the word here I have highlighted to the left here it's Adam's name right there. There you go, Adam. Ka'adom. Because the chet right here is for the word like or as Adam, you might say. But they, as Adam, they broke the covenant. They transgressed the covenant of God. Think about these things. Gilead is a city of them that work iniquity. It is covered with footprints of blood. And his troops of robbers wait for a man. So doeth the company of priests. See there, the company of priests. Right there, the Kohanim. Company of priests. What do the company of priests do? They murder in the way. They got on there towards Shechem. You can take it as Shechem, but King James, they translate it as consent. Also, the word Zephaniah is also translated as consent. I don't quite understand why. I've tried to research this as much as I could, but yet they commit lewdness or enormity, the worst of the worst sins. That's also, zimah is also the word that is used when it's talking about sexual sins over in the Dead Sea Scrolls. But notice they murder in the way towards Shechem or by consent. And which, another thing as well, it doesn't say anything towards Shechem in there. Shechemah. It's on the road, in the way, by consent. Murder. Now, I got to share some things with you on that right there. John chapter 20. Then Jesus said unto them again, Peace be unto you, as my Father has sent me, even so send I you. When he had said this, he breathed. Oh, wait a minute. This is actually a different one. Sorry. Forget exactly why I have that in there. Hang on. Bear with me just one moment. Yeah, I know. I remember why I had that on there, because I meant to bring this out as I was talking about earlier about breathing upon them. See, because of this, remember, they were upon the dust of the earth. And I was showing you how that beautiful type was in there, right? And that was also where Jesus, he breathed upon them. And he said, receive you the Holy Ghost. Again, showing that he was the same God that breathed in the nostrils of Adam, the same God, Jesus Christ, was standing there in the very midst. So you have to kind of realize who is actually there. Let's see what we have here. John chapter 8. Yeah, here we go. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. When they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery, the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down, and with his finger he wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself, and he said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. You know, I always thought it was fascinating too, the fact that he wrote on the ground with his finger. He's at the temple. Why is he writing on the ground with his finger? You know, for one, he's showing that he's the same God. Just like he's the same God that breathed in the nostrils of Adam in the beginning. Ipak bepa'av nishmat chayim, as we read in Genesis just a moment ago. Let me just remind you of that. See, right there. Ipak bepa'av nishmat chayim. He breathed in his nostrils the breath of life. You have to remember, what is the breath of life? The breath of life is the fruit from the tree of life. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden. What? Ve'etz chachayim. There it is right there. Chayim. Betoch hagon, in the midst of the garden. Jesus Christ is that tree of life. And he was doing what? He was breathing the fruit of the tree of life within Adam. And he become what? Lenefesh chaya. That's in the singular here. Why is it in the singular? Why did he breathe it in the plural then? Because inside of him was Eve. And Eve was going to receive the same Holy Spirit. Just like John the Baptist was born filled with the Holy Spirit from his mother's womb. In other words, he had the chaim in him already. He was a chaya. A living soul. A nefesh chaya. And he is a type of the bride of Christ filled with the Holy Ghost from his mother's womb. Oh, wow. So many beautiful things here we could talk about, right? But anyway, so whichever one of you is there without sin, let him cast the first stone. Now, why do I take you to that? Because Hosea says here, and as troops of robbers wait for a man, so doeth the company of priests. They murder in the way by consent. Right? Now, let me just show you so you know where I'm taking this from. Matthew right here. Right? No, I'm sorry, that wasn't the right one. I thought I had it up here, but I didn't. Anyway, in the English Hosea, it's they murdered by consent. If you want to say towards Shechem, it's okay. But it's not Shechem in Hebrew, it's Shechemah. So we know that it would have to be consent and not the case of the land of Shechem. All right, because then it wouldn't have the hey at the end right here. You wouldn't have that letter right there. So, but anyway, they're murdering by consent. How do we know they're murdered by consent? Because Moses had given the commandment. For those that are committing adultery, if adultery is committed, you're to take both the man and the woman, and you take them and you stone them. Now, in the story there that we read here in John, they only bring the woman. And I believe that really and truly what you're dealing with when God was given this command was to put a stop to the adulterous affairs like they were doing when the children of Israel came to the land, and they were dealing with Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Jebusites, and all of them. Because why? They had mixed their seed with Nephilim bloodlines. And we know this because of Numbers We also know it from Ezra chapter 9. I've gone to that so many times you should know by now. Numbers, also chapter 13, I think it is the last verse in there, where we find out that they were the Nephilim in those days, the sons of Anak, the Canaanites, etc. So I believe it's one of the reasons, that's just a conjecture on my part, why God put the law in there. So the law was there, so when they had sinned like they did, like the nations had done, God wanted to put that out of the place there. But in this case here, we find out they're bringing this woman that's been caught in adultery. They don't even bring the guy, just the woman, and they wanted to stone her. And Hosea prophesied about those guys. And he likened them into a bunch of robbers. In the company of priests, and there's a whole company of priests, they murder in the way. The word way, derech, here is, in other words, it is a way that has been permitted, but because they're not doing it justly, it's murder. And they're trying to tempt Jesus, right? So what does Jesus say? Now Moses in the law commanded us, first they say this, Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what sayest thou? They said that, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down with his finger and he wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. So when they continued to ask him, he lifted up himself and he said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out by one by one, beginning at the eldest, even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. And when Jesus had lifted up himself, he saw no one but the woman. And he said to her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. You see, there's mercy. What does Hosea even say? What was it? What do we do? Was it right above it, I believe, or no, a little further down? Yeah, no, right here, verse 6. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. Do you realize that he was prophesying of Christ? See, Christ desired mercy, not sacrifice. When they're doing this like this, it's like offering a sacrifice, a murder by consent. But in the eyes of God, it's just murder. Again, conjecture. You can take it different ways, I'm sure, but it's just a thought I want to share with you. Let's look at this in the book of Romans. Therefore thou art excusable, O man, whosoever thou art that judgest, for when thou judgest another, thou condemnest thyself. For thou that judgest doest the same things. But we are sure that the judgment of God is according to truth against them which commit such things. And again, also, we might take a look at the book of Matthew. Judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. And with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Now, I share that with you because, one, they brought this woman out ready to stone her. They were like that company of priests of Hosea prophesied, that murder in the way by consent, right? And at the same time, they get convicted upon their heart and they walk out. So therefore, I wanted to share with you Matthew chapter 7, where Jesus clearly shows, And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? I believe they were convicted because of their own sins. And their sins convicted them because they're ready to kill this woman of something that they're guilty of. And like Ezra clearly identifies as well. For they have taken, who's they? The people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the peoples of the lands, doing according to their abominations. The abominations of the people that are listed right here, Canaanites, Hittites, etc., 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 were sexual sins of mingling their seed with Nephilim races. And the priests and the Levites had gotten involved in that, for they have taken of their daughters for themselves, for their sons, that the holy seed have mingled themselves with the peoples of the lands. Those peoples of the lands were Nephilim hybrids. No wonder why Hosea also says, I think early on in here, O Ephraim, what shall I do unto thee? Judah, what shall... Oh, wait, no, it's actually near the end here. Yeah, it's right here. In the house of Israel I have seen a horrible thing. Their harlotry is found in Ephraim. Israel is defiled. Now that's the house of Israel. Isn't it interesting that he actually states this right after when he says a company of priests, they murder in the way by consent or towards Shechem? And then he says that the house of Israel have seen a horrible thing. Their harlotry is found in Ephraim. Israel is defiled. But he doesn't leave Israel by itself, just like we see over in the book of Ezra, chapter 9. O Judah, there is a harvest appointed for you, when I would turn the captivity of my people. Where was Judah held in captivity? Babylon. What's the harvest that she had? Well, Ezra tells you right there. They did according to the sins of, same thing that house of Israel did. Same thing the Canaanite, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, Ammonites, Moabites, Egyptians, and Amorites did. They mingled their seed. All right? Those of you that don't believe these type things, let's face the facts. Let's take a look at it. Let's don't leave something undone. Numbers chapter 13, last verse in here. Or no, Amalek dwelleth in the land of the south, the Hittite and the Jebusite, and the Amorite dwelleth in the mountains, and the Canaanite dwelleth in the sea, and along by the side of the Jordan, right? Well, what do you know? And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim. And we were in our own sight as the grasshoppers, and so were we in their sight. And that second word, Nephilim, should be Nephalim. There's no extra yod in there like you have right here. All right? So that's who really is going on. Isn't it fascinating, though? God knew their harlotry and also shows by Hosea that Judah was going to fall prey to the same thing. I just am blown away by prophecies. Now, as we get ready to close here, Hosea chapter 8. I'll save this one for another day. That's a different message altogether. I think I will just mention this. Will they cry unto me, my God? We, Israel, know thee. Israel hath cast off that which is good. The enemy shall pursue him. They have set up kings, but not from me. They have made princes, and I knew it not. Hasmonean dynasty had overthrew what was going on back then. You know, the time has come to expose the serpent and who he really is. God fulfilled his prophecy. And Ephraim shall I do unto thee, for your goodness is the morning clouds. But he does prophesy. After 2 days he will revive us, and on the third day he will raise us up, that we may live in his presence. And they received that life in his presence when Christ came 2,000 years ago. It was a remnant, and it is a fulfillment of Acts chapter 2. And I know that there's still some that is fully persuaded that the Acts chapter 2 is not the fulfillment of Zechariah. I'm going to go into that on another day. I would have loved to have done it now, but it just isn't the right best time for me to do that as of right now. But anyway, I wanted to share this information with you, show you what's going on. I trust it's a blessing to you. Don't forget, we do have the other channels that are going on, especially Brand New Tube. My wife really putting out a lot of videos there. We'll be putting other videos there as well. It's Israeli News Live on Brand New Tube. This is the account right here. As you can see, actually not Israeli News Live, I apologize. It's Stephen and Yana Ben-Nun on Brand New Tube. And Yana's already got, 6 videos posted up in there. So definitely subscribe, jump over there. A lot of good people there. A lot of truthers have gone to this platform as well. And so we really hope to be able to share more of this information with you. And breaking Israel news. Israel to lockdown nation on eve of Rosh Hashanah, the mystery of 10 days. Bonnie Harvey had shared with me the information originally about this. So I was asking her for some of the links Israel locked down through all three feasts. That was also on the news there, and so a lot of information going on about this right now. But God bless you. Thank you. Bonnie says she's looking for the actual written document. She did share with me some different clips here on YouTube about this. And so we'll be updating you more later, maybe just on that issue alone. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun with Ben-Nun Institute of Biblical Research, Israeli News Live, Fact News Network, also Patreon, Israeli News Live. God bless you and thank you for listening.